Hello guys, Crispy here, welcome back to another video. In this one, my friends, I'm gonna be testing a GeForce RTX 4060 in Throne and Liberty. This one is the MSI Ventus version of the card. We are running it with the latest Nvidia drivers, and I'm not manually overclocking it. You can see all of its specs right here in Tech Power-Ups. GPU 0 sizeable bar is also enabled, and over on the left, I'm pairing it with a Ryzen 9 7950X3D CPU with half of its cores disabled, making it pretty much the same as a Ryzen 7 7800X3D, which is faster for gaming than all of the cores enabled, and so on. And finally, 32 gigabytes of DDR5 6000 mega transfers per second RAM in dual channel. Let's get into it, shall we? Let's start by going through the settings. I am playing at 1080p resolution using 100% resolution scale, so it's native res, no DLSS at the moment or frame generation, but we're also going to try that out, of course. And over on the quality settings, I'm using the Epic preset, which is recommended for the RTX 4060. I did disable motion blur and chromatic aberration over here because I don't like those effects, but everything else is at the Epic preset. And here we have it, guys. Right away, I am noticing a ton of ghosting. Like, what the hell is that? See the little witch doll thingy over here? Like, if you take a close look at it, there is a lot of blur around it. That is so weird. Holy crap. I'm using an OLED panel over here, by the way. The input lags are basically non-existent. They're instant, you know. And yeah, this is not my monitor. It's just the game on Epic settings. Probably the anti-aliasing that they got going on here. That's not very good, you know. So there's that. This is also an Unreal Engine title, guys, so we're gonna see a little bit of stuttering happening, especially traversal stuttering, and as you can see, our FPS are already dropping into the 50s, with a lot of stuttering as well. This is not that great, guys, honestly. Like, I thought it was going to be a bit better of an experience, since this is not UE5, okay, it's Unreal Engine, but it's the 4th version, it's not the 5th one, so I thought it was going to perform a bit better, but it does look pretty good, and it's a huge open world, of course, MMORPG with a ton of players around. Yeah, like in that city, I'm actually going to go there right now. The FPS drop even further because usually you get CPU bound there, not really here in this system because we got a 4060 with a Ryzen 9 CPU or a 7800X3D equivalent basically. So of course I don't think the GPU usage is going to fluctuate too much there, but if you have a slower CPU, say like a Ryzen 5 5600, which is adequate for a card like this, I guess. Lots of stuttering, once again, like traversal stuttering going to the city, you know. Yeah, you're going to be screwed here basically, because I started playing this game yesterday with the 4070 Ti Super after I recorded and I made that 4070 Ti Super Forza Horizon 5 video, and once I reached this area over here, actually the middle of the city, which should be around there, I think, it just went to hell. My FPS were locked at 60 for the most part in the first half hour of gameplay, but once I reached this area, it was getting down into like the 50s and 40s sometimes, while being CPU bound. Okay, it's concerning, guys. It's very concerning. I'm not sure if this is the actual city that I wanted to show you. Maybe it is, but I'm not sure where is the middle of it. Because there is an area where a lot of people are. I think it's right there. So I'm just going to teleport there. Yep. Yeah, there we go. See that, guys? Holy crap. Yesterday, I guess it was even more populated because it was running a bit worse. Obviously, your FPS, at least on the CPU side of things, will depend a lot on the server where you're playing. So if you're playing with very few people in your server, you're gonna get way higher FPS if you are CPU bound. But if you are GPU bound, like in this system right here, the FPS that you get inside of the city are pretty much the same as outside of this city. So at least there's that. Now, there is something that you can do to achieve a higher FPS without dropping the quality settings right here, and that is enabling some DLSS. Now, I really wish that this game had DLAA over here, so we could use the frame generation without having to enable like an upscaler basically, but no, you actually got to utilize DLSS quality with frame generation if you want to utilize frame generation, unfortunately. Good thing is, the DLSS quality doesn't look bad at all, and in terms of that ghosting that we were seeing, let me just go a little bit further away here. It's still there, but it's actually kind of minimized right now with DLSS, which is weird. Also, you can see that our GPU utilization now is actually fluctuating, dropping down into the 60-70% range sometimes into like the 80%, and sometimes it maxes out as well. So it is a CPU bound scenario here with a 4060 and a 7950X3D, which is running as a 7800X3D. It's kind of crazy once again, and if you have a slower CPU, you will see way lower FPS once again. But this is a GPU test, so I'm testing it here with this system. Now, the thing is, if you have a CPU bottleneck, frame generation usually helps it a lot, okay? So enabling this should put our GPU at 99% all of the time, and it gives us a higher fresh rate experience at the same time. Look at that. So GPU isn't really at 99% all of the time because the game is stuttering a little bit, and there are a lot of people here, of course, but it's not dropping down into that 60 to 70% range, or 80% even. It doesn't even drop from like what, the low 90% range, which is pretty impressive. Okay, so if you have a 4060 with any CPU, I think I would recommend you to utilize some frame generation in this title. It also smooths out the frame rate and frame time by a lot compared to what we were seeing. We're still seeing stuttering issues, but the 1% lows are much better right now, and it shouldn't stutter as much as it did previously. Oh, there's a dog right here. This is interesting. Play. Let's play with the dog. Hello, buddy. Oh, so cute, actually. Yeah, around here, 120s. So this is probably why they recommend the epic settings for the RTX 4060 in this game, because they think that you'll utilize upscaling and frame generation, because that's the norm these days, unfortunately. It's kind of ridiculous that developers are now making us use upscaler by default. There are even some games, or at least one game, that puts frame generation into their system requirements for 60 FPS, and if you get 60 FPS with FG enabled, it feels terrible. If you've played around with it, you know what I'm talking about. The input lag is insane at 60 FPS with frame generation. It's basically the same as 30 FPS, so it's not good, okay? That should never be in system requirements, okay? I think I would utilize these settings for 1080p with the RTX 4060. It looks good, it plays very smoothly, aside from the little frame time spikes that we're seeing here and there, you know, but yeah, you're gonna have a great time here with the 4060 in this particular game, with all of the upscalers and so on enabled. But again, I wish there was like a DLAA option to keep the native resolution while having frame generation, because that would be the ideal way to play, because you wouldn't have any degradation from the upscaler part of the DLSS, basically. Anyway, guys, let me touch on this real quick here. There's also FSR2 and XeSS on experimental, so they didn't even finish the XeSS implementation, apparently, and the FSR is FSR2. Why FSR2? FSR 3.1 is such a great technology. You should utilize that, you know, instead of FSR2. Come on. Anyway, I'm gonna drop it down to high settings now, and what happened to our FPS? Wait, let me just disable motion blur here. Yeah, it enabled DLSS on quality. That's why our FPS were so high. As you can see, like, DLSS is in another area of the menu, but if you enable high settings, it enables itself by default. So the developers are, once again, making use of DLSS by default, which is crazy, once again. Anyways, here with high settings, as you can see, it's getting way higher FPS, so if you prefer to have native resolution instead of playing around with frame generation and so on, and quality DLSS, which, you know, like, it's fair enough. I myself, since the game doesn't allow you to use DLAA plus FG, I would probably just switch to high settings and play on high with 90-something FPS without frame generation, but that is if you have a very fast CPU. It is what it is, guys. I mean, maybe they'll make an update and add DLAA to the picture here and then allow you to utilize DLSS FG. Maybe they'll add FSR 3.1. That would be awesome as well. That would allow you to run native resolution, actually, with FSR FG at the same time as well. That's great. But for now, this is what we have in this game. At least it's not UE5, because Imagine if this was UE5, and I'm here saying that it's UE4 just because I did a quick Google search, checked a couple of websites, they all said it's UE4, but I'm not 100% sure, actually. It could be UE5, but it's impossible, basically, because otherwise it would look a little bit better than this, and it would actually completely wreck our RTX 4060. It's probably UE4, right? Anyway, it's getting like 80s around here, not bad. I really like the fact that we are Jack in this game. It's awesome, right? Oh boy. And there are actual Jacks, like that one, for example, is not a dog. He is a panther or something. It is Jack, my friends. It is Jack. This is awesome. What the heck is this one? This one is like a dinosaur or something. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. But as you can see, running around here, it's getting us 100 FPS. So some of the settings are definitely CPU intensive. They're not all GPU bound. So lowering settings at least will give you a lot more FPS, even if you are CPU bound in this title. And again, you're likely going to be CPU bound a lot of the time because of the amount of people that you have in a single server. But as you can see, in this area, it's still CPU bound with the 7800X 3D, guys. Look at that. Again, dropping into the 40s, just like I saw it with the RTX 4070 Ti Super when I reached this area. Wow, it's insane, isn't it? I mean, I can't be mad at this. Optimization could definitely improve, don't get me wrong. It's not that great in this game. But the sheer amount of people, look at this. Every single one of these characters is a person playing this game. And it's insane right now. Okay? That's why I can't really be mad about this. It's pretty impressive what they've done here. But again, on a slower CPU, things will probably be pretty bad, like 20, 30 FPS, something like that. Kind of like we've seen with Dragon's Dogma. But in Dragon's Dogma, it was an absolute shit show. Yeah, I'm swearing here, guys, that game deserves it, okay? Anyway, I think that's it. The high settings provide really good performance, of course. If you want, again, better FPS, and if you have a slower CPU, do make sure to enable quality DLSS plus frame generation. And as you can see, it can go up to like 140 FPS or something like that. We had a little bit of an improvement compared to Epic settings, once again, as expected. But I'm not going to spend more time here. If you want to play with FG, I think you should stick to Epic settings anyways. And now I'm going to try it out at 1440p. So here we have it, 2560 by 1440, 100% resolution scale. The DLSS and all of that is disabled right now, and we're still utilizing the same high settings. And look at this. It's not bad. Like, once again, since this is a more CPU-bound area, the FPS aren't too different from what we saw at 1080p. I mean, it was going up to like 70, 80 FPS at native resolution. Here it is often into the 50s, dropping into the 40s, but it also dipped into the 40s with this CPU when it became CPU-bound briefly, so there's that. It's not going to drop too much further than what we saw so far. And it's pretty impressive for 1440p high settings with an RTX 4060. And given the type of game that this is, I think, I'm not a professional in it or anything like that. I haven't really played a lot of MMORPG games in the past. Wait a second, can I remove this from me? Oh yes, I can. So that was there for the entire video, and now I just discovered that I can hide it. Good stuff. Anyway, I think a game like this is definitely playable, even if you drop into the 40s and maybe even 30s, you know, and it will happen. Of course, like I'm just running around here going into the city, which is extremely intensive, of course, but out here I'm not really doing much. It's not really that intensive. We're seeing some vegetation, which can be GPU bound, but it dropped more inside of the city, of course. So if you're fighting bosses and stuff, you can expect the FPS to drop a little bit with a lot of effects, especially if you're fighting with other people, the same boss. Yeah, it's gonna drop a little bit. Let's see it around here. I guess it's gonna be less intensive because this is looking like a desert area, basically. 70s. 60 sometimes. Yeah, it is less intensive around here. But yeah, guys, I think that's about it for native res at 1440p. With DLSS, it will definitely get to 60 plus whenever you're not CPU bound again. So let's enable that on quality. No frame generation yet. And I think, yeah, look at that, 80s. So we're back to what we were seeing at the native 1080p resolution, but now it looks way better, because it's DLSS quality at 1440p, and even though the internal resolution is 900 something p, it is still looking way better because of the upscaling part than native 1080p. So if you have a 1440p monitor with the RTX 4060, or if you're running the 4060 mobile, which is around like what, 5 to 10% slower than this one, it's not a big difference actually. And if your monitor has a 1440p panel or a 1600p panel, for example, you can actually run at your native resolution. 1600p is a bit more intensive than this though, so expect like 10-15 less FPS, but it will run absolutely fine while looking really, really good at the same time because of quality DLSS. Again, it makes the picture quality a little bit softer than native resolution, but it also removes some of that ghosting effect that we were seeing with the native anti-aliasing of the game. So it is the better option, I think, for an RTX 4060 for sure. You should utilize it here at 1440p resolution. It changes the experience completely, of course, and obviously, if you use the frame generation on top of this, that guy is coming to attack us. Actually, no, he's not. Okay, never mind. If you use the FG, it will remove CPU bottlenecking scenarios, or at least minimize them, and you'll get an even bigger bump in performance coming from quality DLSS. So as you can see, it also makes things slightly softer once again, like quality DLSS makes things softer. FG bumps that a little bit further, and it's even slightly softer. But I think there's no arguing that it is a very smooth experience here. And if you want more stable frame rates, although with a lot of stuttering still because it's Unreal Engine, this is it, okay? It's gonna work even at 1440p. Also, VRAM allocation at 1080p, I don't think it went up to 8 gigabytes at 1440p here with frame generation. It is around 7.1 gigabytes of VRAM allocation, but that's not the actual usage. This game, unfortunately, can't read the usage, so I can't show that to you, but it would be probably like around a gigabyte less than what we're seeing there. So in terms of VRAM, it's still absolutely fine, although you will need a lot of RAM to play this game. You can see it's using 17.5 gigs. It went up to like 18 gigs at some point, maybe even 19 gigs. So this game will eat RAM for breakfast. It's not a Rust kind of experience where it eats like 25 gigabytes of RAM and 20 gigabytes of VRAM, you know? At least the VRAM side of things is good. Like an 8 gigabyte card can play it at 1440p high settings, as you can see. But yeah, you gotta keep in mind, you do need more than 16 gigabytes of RAM. Otherwise, I think it will become a bit more stuttery than what it is right now. And lastly, guys, I got 4K resolution for you using no DLSS, high settings preset still. And obviously, this is a bit too much for the RTX 4060. I'm curious to see if there's still the ghosting issue. Yes, there is still a lot of ghosting around the witch character here. Look at that. It's so noticeable. I'm not sure if it's going to come across with a recording and YouTube compression and so on, but it's really noticeable here whenever you're not using DLSS. Now, yeah, this is pretty terrible now. 30 FPS with stuttering issues is no good. It also swapped some things that should be on VRAM into the RAM already, and that's why our RAM usage is going up slightly, reaching like 20 gigabytes at the moment. However, it is not breaking our game completely. So if you run out of VRAM in this title, it's not gonna kill your experience, which is great to see. Some games like become completely unplayable. They even crash sometimes whenever you run out of VRAM. This doesn't seem to be one of them, at least. So they took care of some aspects of optimization. And it's especially impressive if you compare it to something like Dragon's Dogma 2. Anyway, the FPS are too low here, so I'm actually going to utilize performance DLSS and keep the high settings first. And look at that, it's getting 60 FPS now. So if you want that around 60 FPS experience with the 4060, it is possible to have it, which is very good, you know. I honestly wasn't expecting to see a jump from 30 to 60 plus, because in some games, when you enable DLSS performance at 4K, they don't give you that many more FPS. Now, performance DLSS actually renders the game at 1080p resolution and upscales it to 4K. But here, guys, I can tell you that, first of all, ghosting is basically gone around our witch thingy. And second, it looks better than native 1440p. Okay, so if you're using DLSS with a 4060 at 4K resolution, use performance DLSS. It's fantastic looking, and in this game it's actually a good implementation in my opinion. It's just slightly softer than native res, but a lot of detail is still preserved, and I think it's definitely worth utilizing. And depending on your CPU, you will likely see a CPU bottleneck scenario even at 4K high with performance DLSS. So there's that, guys, even though we're not really seeing that here. But all you need to do in that case is enable frame generation once again. Oh boy, RAM usage is going up, so I think we are heavily running out of VRAM at this point, even though it says 7.5 gigabytes or something of usage. And oh yeah, of course, I just took a look at the FPS. It's lower than performance DLSS alone without FG, and that is a clear indication that the VRAM is completely saturated at this point. You just, yeah, there's no point in utilizing frame generation at 4K with this card. VRAM is not enough, simply. So let's drop it down, I guess, to medium settings and check it out. It's good that we don't really need to restart the game whenever doing this. Gonna disable motion blur as well. And it's still, oh no, it's actually defaulted to quality DLSS, but I want to use performance here. That's very stuttery. Maybe now we need to restart the game because, yeah, it's already swapped a lot of things into VRAM. So, yeah, we need to do that. I'll be back soon. And we're back here, guys. This is medium settings, still looking very good. I mean, there's not that big of a difference, honestly, aside from like ambient occlusion and shadow detail that I can see, at least at a first glance. We're at 4K performance DLSS using medium settings, and you can see that the VRAM went down by a lot right now, but it will keep going up as we play the game, load on other areas and stuff like that. So again, make sure that you have more than 16 gigabytes. I think it's definitely going to benefit from that. It's already at 15 and I've just been running around this. That frame time is super stuttery though. Probably because, again, we are in this area with a lot more people. Now, there is something that you can do probably to fix that, and that is locking the FPS to 60. Also, developers, if you're watching this, I'd like to see something like 45 and 90 between 120 and 60 and 60 and 30, you know. That would be great, because the jump from 30 to 60 is very big, and 60 to 120 is also super big. And I just wanted to see if this would make the graph a little bit smoother, but it doesn't. It seems like the built-in FPS lock, it still has a lot of micro-stuttering issues there on the frame time graph, unfortunately. So it's kind of the same thing if you unlock it or lock it. Yeah, maybe it's a little bit bigger spikes right now with the FPS unlocked, but it doesn't really change the experience too much. So don't lock your FPS, I guess, in this title with the built-in lock. Now, there are other ways to lock the FPS. I usually prefer to do it with Rivet Tuner right here. And if I lock it to 60, wait a second, there we go. You can see that that actually makes our frame time completely flat. And just going back to the game here, there we go. So this is definitely my preferred way to play this game at 4K with the RTX 4060, I think, because, again, there's no fluctuations anymore in that frame time. However, whenever there is traversal stuttering happening, you will see these bigger spikes, which are very noticeable, of course, but they would be there anyways, even with the FPS unlocked. So yeah, for a more stable experience, although not 100% stable, I guess not even 90% stable, this is a decent way to play it. Look at that. Damn. You also save a little bit of power, by the way, if you lock your FPS, and especially with very power-hungry GPUs, I always recommend you to lock your frames, unless you want the smoothest experience possible with FG and so on, yeah, then just let it run, okay? And with all of that said, I think that's been it for this one, guys. Thank you very much for watching the video. 4060 is definitely capable of playing this game. Unfortunately, it's not really that well optimized, and it runs the Unreal Engine, so it stutters a lot, even with shader compilation. But yeah, it's been out for a few days as well, so maybe we'll see some optimization patches. It's still very impressive to me how they managed to put so many players inside of a single server while still making it playable. A lot of other developers these days wouldn't really be able to do that. Thanks for watching. Catch you in the next one. Love you all. Bye-bye.